Welcome everyone, whether you're here in person or on the recording. Thanks for coming to our Meet the Mentor. I'm Olive Dodd and I'm your host for today. I'm also an artist at Mastrius, taking a few mentorship courses, and I'm a navigator. So I do a lot of behind the scenes technology stuff. But yeah, so I'll be helping with a smooth session today and ensure all your questions are answered. So today's event is an opportunity to meet Sue Dion and share a little bit about her artistic journey. And if you miss any part of this session, you can always come back. It'll be posted on the Mastrius YouTube channel, so you can watch it later. And if you'd like to stick around till after the event, I'll briefly show you how the website works and how you can join courses and mentorships and how to register. And just before we begin, just to let you know, if you'd like to turn on your camera, that'd be lovely. If not, if you're comfortable, that's fine too. If you have any questions, please either raise your virtual hand, unmute yourself, or and speak up, or put it in the chat, and I will be watching the chat to make sure that all the questions are answered. Great, and we have another person. Oh, we have a few more. Wonderful, welcome. Hi there. I'm just about to give a little intro, so just feel free to mute yourself just to stop the background noise. But if you'd like to ask a question, then feel free to unmute and speak up, or put your questions in the chat. So I'm just going to share my screen and just do a little intro.
Oh my gosh, that's an oldie. Wow, where did you find that? I was in a
On
Chinese
your
restaurant,
website or something like that.
and
But
they actually had the tree out in front with those fruits on it. I can't remember what they're called. And the waiter picked some and brought them in for me, so I did a painting.
oh,
Anyway,
lovely. Oh,
yeah,
nice. But
sorry for interrupting.
that's okay. So Sue Dion is a multi-talented artist who works across various mediums, including acrylics, watercolors, and oils. Her creative journey is characterized by a passion for self-expression and exploration. Through bold and expressive brushwork, Sue evokes emotions, stirring the imagination, and invites viewers into a world of vibrant colors and dynamic forms. She draws inspiration from the beauty of nature, the complexity of human emotion, and the interplay of light and shadow. Her work reflects a reverence for the world around her and a desire to capture its essence on canvas. At the heart of Sue's artistic practice lies a commitment to authenticity and emotional truth. Through her expressionistic style, she strives to communicate the rawness and complexity of human experience, inviting viewers to connect with the universal themes of love, loss, longing, and hope. I love that. Sue's work is described as imaginative, empowering, and enthusiastic. Her appreciation for the gift of painting has never dulled and is evident in the way she shares her gift with us. She's offering a course coming up on May 25th, and a mentorship that's ongoing on the second Monday of every month from 3 to 5 Mountain Time. Beautiful. Okay.
Nice. I was wondering who wrote that, you or me. I didn't recognize it.
It's a combination of what was on the Mastrius, what you had on your website. So
I love it. I love what you did with it. It's very concise. It's well done. Thank you. And welcome everyone who was able to join us here this evening. Please don't hesitate to put your questions into the feed or even unmute yourself. I think Olive was going to just to explain that to you. But yeah, I'm happy you're here. I'm happy to be here. I'm very fortunate to be able to generate a living doing what I love to do. And it's not easy, but it is possible. Lots of balls always kind of spinning in the air. So I've put together a little spreadsheet, or not a spreadsheet, but a little PowerPoint presentation. So I thought I would just maybe pace through these images while I'm talking to you. So with your permission, Olive, I'm going to share my screen.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Enjoying the video? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when new Mastrius videos are added.
So I love painting with watercolor, with acrylic, and with oil. And it's kind of funny because in each of those mediums, I seem like a different artist. Most of my acrylic paintings tend to be very abstracted and large. My oil paintings tend to be a bit more representational. And I've been working with watercolor the longest, and I think that kind of runs the gamut through all of those options. So I've been teaching watercolor for about 24 years now. And I'm offering a course through Mastrius on how to paint loose flowers in watercolor. And honestly, these techniques you could also adapt to acrylic or oil. So if you're not a watercolor painter and you're interested in learning how to paint loose flowers, loose floral paintings, then please join us. You don't have to specifically work with watercolor. I just thought I would maybe put that caveat out there. I tend to abstract my paintings in some general ways, and I thought I would point them out to you. In this one, I'm using a couple of different techniques. One is adding some geometric shapes into the background, and the other is using some ink to just kind of accent some of those shapes. And when I say ink, I tend to use a Sharpie. Any non-soluble marker would work for that. And there are so many available out there. And another thing that I love to do with watercolors is use different surfaces. So the painting on the left is a traditional watercolor painting done on paper. And the one on the right is done on top of absorbent ground. It's a medium that you can buy, that you can coat a surface with it, and then it behaves more like paper. So I really loved this painting, and you can also display these without any glass, which is my absolute favorite thing about using absorbent ground. And this one, I was varnishing it, so I'll give it a quick mist with a spray varnish, and then I'll brush a varnish on. You don't want to brush varnish on top of your watercolor because it will smear it. Unfortunately, when I picked up the can of what I thought was spray varnish, it was actually white paint. So all of that little texture that you see down in the vase and along the side, a happy little accident. It was not my intention, but it spit out white paint all over my painting. And I went, huh, I kind of like that.
Yeah,
I don't think
it works. It's great.
I know, you just never know. So I don't think I would recommend that unless you really practice it. But obviously the same composition. And I do use the same composition a lot and change up the colors. These two are also painted on absorbent ground on top of a board. And you can make your own absorbent ground, but Daniel Smith sells one. I think they call theirs watercolor ground, and Golden sells one pre-made, and they call it absorbent ground. And it's a little different. If you've ever used something called Yupo, which I should bring that painting up here because, well, we'll talk about that later. Yupo is another alternative surface. So that's one of the things I do to try to make the paintings a little edgier, a little more interesting, is I kind of try and play around with the surfaces that I'm working on. But I will often take a theme and repeat it. So here on the left, we have yet another painting done on absorbent ground. And it's a lot like I mentioned just a moment ago, it's a lot like a product called Yupo, which is called a paper, but it's technically plastic. And you can put wonderful shapes in and you can lift back to the white really easily, but it's very challenging to try to glaze color on top of color because it will tend to lift. And then the one on the right is a traditional watercolor created on probably Arch's 140-pound paper. That's what I tend to gravitate toward. So I'm going to put my hand up here and a few more of these little round vases. One of the things that I really strive to do to make my watercolor paintings more loose is I try to lose edges. So in this painting on the right-hand side, you can just see up here, there's a suggestion of more pansies, but only a few are really highly detailed. Where on the left, I went more for color and boldness and working with negative shapes, creating the shape of something by painting behind it. And that is something we do a lot in watercolor. Here's another loose painting of hydrangea. I really love the square vase in this one. And then sometimes I'll just do very dark against very light. That's another technique that can really help you to abstract, where the flowers on the top half are a light against a dark. But in the bottom half of the painting, they're a dark against a light. And in where the stems would be, quote unquote, stems, I've just come in and parked some of those dark shapes in there to try to describe the shapes of the stems. I love the little red flower on the lower right-hand side that's just kind of dripping off, right? So I really try to push the elements of flowers. I tend to paint a lot of flowers. Interestingly enough, my dad and my grandfather were wholesale florists. So I grew up in greenhouses. So there you go. Wherever you go, there you are. And that's kind of been my experience. I love the beauty and the melodic line and the grace that you find in nature. And that really kind of is something that I try to emulate and try to pull out in my paintings.
I love that because it takes the pressure away from making a perfect flower.
Yeah, I think sometimes the biggest mistake we can make as artists is to try to exactly replicate what we're seeing, right? What we really want to do is take the ordinary and make it extraordinary. I don't think it was Picasso that said that. I think it might have been Monet. It's not mine, but that's kind of what I strive to do. I want to imbibe a little bit of mystery, a little bit of curiosity in the paintings. And this is one where I've used that inking technique, the little fine Sharpie, ultra fine exactly is typically what I use. And here's a painting that was created on that surface I was talking about earlier, Yupo. And Yupo, you can kind of have to be careful with because if you touch it with your fingers, it'll accept the oils from your hand and then it won't accept the watercolor paint where you've touched it. So I used to handle it with cotton gloves. And then one of my students said to me one day, it's plastic. You can take it to the sink and wash it with soap. And absolutely you can. So if you've got a Yupo painting that you're working through and you're having areas where the pigment won't stick, you can just take a little bit of Dawn. Dawn is really great for cutting grease. So, clean the whole thing, clean the section that you're having a trouble with. But this is one of those elements that will really force you to be loose. And that's one of the things I really try to do when I'm painting is kind of thwart myself from the get-go so that I don't get too tight. A few things you can do to do this is to move a little further back from your painting. Definitely use a bigger brush. If you put a little brush in your hand, you're going to be tight. If you hold it like a pencil, you're going to be tight. If you pronate, and I'll show you how to do that a little bit later on when I'm doing a demo for you, it's gonna, the paints aren't going to go exactly where you want them to be. Often, and probably with this little painting, I will use a flat brush. And again, I can't get that detail. It won't allow me to. So I've got to accept the shapes. And if you can focus on the shapes and focus on your values, you're going to have a much stronger painting. I'm hoping to put together a course soon featuring dogwoods. And I actually have two paintings. I had done this one. It had sold. Somebody really loved it, wanted me to do something for her. And this was the second version of that painting. But I often, and I'm sure most of you who paint do the same thing. Something about certain things just draws us. And we wind up doing multiple paintings of the same image.
Would you say dogwood is your favorite subject to paint, or just all flowers?
Yeah, no, I honestly think I love doing roses, which I'm going to do for you tonight. I love doing peonies. But again, abstracting them. I don't know that I have the patience for photorealistic painting. So I don't know. This one, honestly, would be a bit of a, I don't know. Is it a loose painting? There's certainly a lot of contrast in here. But what I really love about it is the background. And if you just look into that background, you'll see that there aren't leaves back there. There aren't stems. There are just these negative shapes that are going to suggest leaves and stems to you. So I like this one because it does have the contrast of a little more detail in the blossoms, but then let the rest of it go. If you put detail everywhere, everybody's going to get too tired trying to figure out what strand of dogwood that is. What region of the country does it grow? You know what I mean? And I feel that detail can kind of thwart us in the end. And if we can just try to stay a little lyrical in our work, I did try to lead the eye through this painting using those lights and darks. So those are some of the things we'll talk about. This was a lovely little reference image that a friend had taken a photograph of a lily. And I started it, I think it's on the wall behind me. No, it's not. But I started it in acrylic on a 24 by 24 canvas, and I still haven't finished that painting. But I sat down one day and sketched it out and decided to do it in watercolor, and I just love this little piece. It's 6 by 6 inches. That's another key to painting loosely. Paint small. Paint small,
Right.
paint often, have fun. If every painting is supposed to be a masterpiece, where's the joy, right?
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah,
It's tiring.
yeah, it can be, it's just, oh my gosh, we get so apoplectic. It's like, ah, I can't touch this. I remember the first time I bought a sheet of 300-pound Arches watercolor paper. I think at the time I spent $11 on it. But for me, it was like, I was too afraid to touch it because I was going to ruin it. So just chop up a bunch of small pieces of watercolor paper or get some small canvases, do some loose sketching, and play.
That is so true. I have big sheets that I've never cut up because I don't know what to do with them.
Oh my gosh. Yes, I know it's crazy. So I see, actually, I've just been distracted. I think S. Goldstein might be my good friend Barbara, who I haven't seen in years, a former student. And I think Victoria is as well. And I'm so glad you guys were able to join me. And Dorothea, I apologize if we've met, but all of you have your cameras off. So I'm here. I'm at a loss. It's not like those names are all that uncommon. But I so appreciate you joining me this evening. And if there are more of you here that I can't see, welcome and thanks for being with me. Honestly, painting is a gift. It is such a gift to me. It can boost your confidence. It can calm your mind. It can give you relief from whatever you're struggling with. And it just returns and returns and returns. And I think we tend to want, maybe we have higher expectations and we think we're not good enough. You are every bit good enough. Every bit.
Dorothy says she received your email information, but you haven't met in person.
Oh, lovely. Thank you for letting me know, Olive. So anyway, let's see, I'm just going to go through a few of these because I know you probably want to see me paint. These two pieces are probably 12 by 20 something. They're very tall, very long and narrow. It's a diptych. These were done on watercolor paper, but they are not framed under glass. I used, oh, what is that? Cold wax. I don't know if any of you are familiar with cold wax, but you can finish a watercolor painting on paper using cold wax, and then you can frame it without glass. So that's the beauty of using that absorbent ground, and also the beauty of finishing your paintings with cold wax. And you can just Google how to do that. But it's a product that's typically used with oil paint. And I've done oil paintings with cold wax, and it's really a lot of fun. Makes it really stiff, makes it dry a little bit quicker, great for abstraction. But I love these for, they're very lyrical. And I love the little, again, in the background, there's really no leaves back there. It's the suggestion. There's the light and the dark. There's the push and the pull. There's a few lost edges in these. I would have probably liked to save a few more of the lost edges. Don't try to paint every flower in detail. If you feel like you really have to get some detail in there, pick one spot. And when you're picking a spot for detail, let me come down to the next one. Think about superimposing a tic-tac-toe onto your painting, just in your mind. And wherever two of those lines intersect, that's a great spot for your focal point. And in your focal point, you're going to want to have your lightest light, your darkest dark. You're going to want to have the most saturated color. I'm not sure this painting is the best example of that, but those are the things you want to be thinking about. Because the focal perspective is that when we're looking at something with the human eye, everything else softens out. But when we're painting, we're focusing on each aspect of that painting. And sometimes we forget that we just want to draw the eye to one area. So if you choose two places where lines, or one place where two lines intersect, imagining a tic-tac-toe board on top of your painting, that's a pretty positive place to put your impact area. Really, the only place you don't want to put the impact area, and let me get my mouse, is right here, right smack dab in the middle. But somewhere in the upper left, upper right, lower right, it doesn't have to be, it's not a science. Just go to that general area. Will give you a more successful painting. I love doing these little roses. You can see here where I've really let go out in the outer left-hand side, and I've focused more of the details here in the lower, kind of close to center. So it doesn't have to be perfect. I've suggested a vase. I've suggested water. Good God, help me, I used blue. You don't have to use blue, but these are really fun to paint, and I'm going to be painting some of these for you tonight, and I may even skip off and grab my little Sharpie so that I can show you how I apply that. I intentionally make the Sharpie very loose. This is, again, just a little, honestly, this one, I don't know what I was thinking. Who would put that vase right there on the edge of the table? It's almost causing me anxiety. I don't know.
Oh, it could be a window, I was thinking.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to go with that from now on. But the suggestion of the tulip, it's not a botanical study. It's a painting. I love whimsy. The pencil lines, notice them? So many of my students go, oh, I can see the pencil line. That's okay. Sketching is part of the process of creating a watercolor painting. And if you can see your pencil lines, it's all right. It will never be denied entry into a museum because it has pencil lines. So you just go ahead and sketch. It's part of painting with watercolor. If it really bothers you, maybe ink it. Ink over your pencil lines. Take a nice white plastic eraser and see if you can erase them. Sometimes if your pencil lines get under the pigment, they're a little bit harder to lift. So, but I just wanted to give you permission to have pencil lines in your paintings.
I love it. Freedom.
Yes, exactly. It's really okay. Here's two versions of the same painting. Honestly, I thought they were the same painting until I noticed the greenery. The leaves are coming out in different spots. So I actually have a third version of this that I didn't get an image put in. But you can see that theme of just a little bit, just the suggestion. Are they limes? I've never seen limes that look like that. But there's also that variety of edge. And that's another thing that's key in a successful watercolor, any painting, I guess. Some hard edges and some soft edges. And if you don't know what a hard and soft edge is, that's okay. A soft edge is where we really don't see a delineation between two colors or two values. And a hard edge is this bizarre little shape down here on my lime, which probably doesn't belong there, but it kind of mirrors the arc of this shape here. Repetition is a wonderful thing to put into your paintings. We've got this curve here, that curve, this curve. So all of these little shapes are repeating themselves throughout the painting. You don't even really have to think about this, guys. It will happen. And then you will begin to recognize that it's happening. And then you can begin to incorporate it intentionally. But if you're just starting out, don't worry about it. Just paint and enjoy the process. But do think about those areas where we have hard edges that are defining something, right? If I see a hard edge in a painting, I want to know what it is. So typically, I wouldn't let this little stem with a leaf live on my line. But it was so whimsical and I liked it. And it showed kind of the shape of the lime because we're working on a two-dimensional surface, but we're trying to describe a world that's three-dimensional. And line is one of the ways that we do that. I know I'm going off. Oh, this one's one of my favorites. I call it Petunia-esque. I was doing this with a student as a demo, and I really, really love the way that it came out. There's a spontaneity about it. And that's the other benefit. This one is actually a 15 by 11. So it's a quarter sheet of watercolor paper. And, but it came off quite nicely. I really enjoyed it. Typically, I would still recommend that you start small and move up to the bigger ones. One of my favorite things about this is the suggestion of the reflection of the vase. And where did that brown orange come from? I don't know, but I still like it. I still let it stay. And this one's a little bit tighter, but still the background is very luminous and looser.
Yeah, I love how the flowers just blend into the background.
Yeah, they kind of do. And they just kind of lead your eye. You know, you can come in through here, you can come up, you can move around, you can kind of dance through the whole painting. And the background isn't all soft edges. And I'm going to show you how to dampen your paper so you can get some of this little bit of texture. Watercolor, we do not paint with the color white. So if you're looking at white in a watercolor painting, you are looking at the paper. And we kind of have to plan ahead and we have to think about how we're going to save those whites. With this vase, or maybe it's a picture, I probably just painted around it. But you can also use a product called masking fluid, which will help you to then, you just paint it. It's kind of like, it's a liquid, but when it dries, it becomes like gum. What's that stuff I'm trying to think of? It's a kind of glue. Anyway, and then it just peels off.
Rubber cement.
Rubber cement. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the assist. So, also, I work in acrylic and oil. And I didn't put many of these in, but these are just a couple of small paintings that I did in the same style using acrylic. Well, acrylic is water-based. Watercolor is water-based. They're pretty similar. You don't want to thin your acrylics down too much, though. If you do want really, really thin acrylics, they make fluid acrylics, and they make another kind as well. But don't use more than 40% water, maybe 30. If you really want to thin your acrylics down, pick up some airbrush medium, because airbrush medium has the same molecular structure as acrylic paint. If you use water and acrylic paint don't have the same molecular structure, and that water will break that acrylic paint down. So, does anyone have any questions or thoughts or comments about any of what I just said? Did I confuse you? Did I contradict myself?
No, not at all.
Oh, so I think what I should do is, I meant to do this earlier. I'm going to put my phone on and I'm going to get it up here on my little phone holder, and I'm going to do some painting with you. It is you, Barbara. It is so good to see you and not see you, but it's so good to have you here. I know you moved, I think it was to the Cape. And Victoria, do you go down to no, you go to Florida, don't you? Anyway, put in the chat what you're up to, or just send me an email.
Or where you're from?
Whom?
Love to know where everyone's from.
Yeah. By the way, I should have said that. I'm Sue Dion. I probably meant to say that when I had my picture up there. I live in Massachusetts. It's a very small town called Uxbridge, and it's just over the border of Rhode Island, which is the very, very smallest state in the country, unless Washington, D.C. No, what's that place? Yeah. Anyway, that's where I live. I was born and raised in Massachusetts. I've lived in lots of different places of the country, the Midwest, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Missouri, Minnesota. I think that's it. And I just realized I've lived in Uxbridge, Massachusetts longer than I've lived anywhere in my entire life. Do not ask me why, but this is where I am.
And
And
is this your studio behind you?
this is my studio. Yes. So the home that we purchased had an illegal apartment in the basement. I didn't realize it was illegal when we bought it, but I have since been told. So I have another building on my property where I used to have my studio. It was a 24 by 30 building. And also a custom picture framer. And I teach a
Oh,
lot of in studio classes. So I put my frame shop out there and I taught classes, and then I put a 16 by 20 addition on the back that I loved. It had 3 skylights and it was all windows. And for the next 5 to 7 years, my galleries kept saying, "Your paintings are too dark." And I couldn't figure out why. There was so much light in that studio that my eye was adjusting for the light as I was painting. But when they would take it to a client's house to hang it, it would be like, where'd the painting go? Funny thing,
oh,
something I
wow.
never think about. Yeah. So, oh, so Victoria's in the Boston area. I don't know how unfortunate that is because I can't do anything here. I don't even think we don't have a Wendy's. I mean, we have nothing, but that's okay. All right, I'm putting my
That's
phone.
okay. You don't need Wendy's.
Yeah, I suppose. There are other things I could be, longing for. The theater, the opera, I used to love to go into Boston to see the Pops every spring. And I miss doing that. Not that I'm so far away. I'm about 45 minutes from Boston.
And
So,
so do you paint every day?
I would love to lie and say yes. I'm probably one of the more undisciplined painters. Somebody was talking about it earlier. I saw a video about it. She said, I paint a lot, and I do paint a lot, but I'm either painting for a show or I'm painting for a class, right? Yeah. So I um I believe that there are 3 keys to success when it comes to being an artist. And I talk about this a lot. We didn't really mention the mentorship, but I think that you need to remember the head, the heart, and the hand. Oh, and I made myself some notes earlier. I just remembered that. So we all tend to focus on the hand. We focus on the technique. We focus on what we need to learn. And we spend so much time working in that area. But you need to remember the head. And what's the head when I say that? Part of it is the business end of being an artist, right? You've got to be able to approach galleries. There's a lot of things you have to do. You may not want to seek gallery representation. In that regard, then the head is your mindset. So when we begin to do something that we're not comfortable with, that we're not very good at, we then by definition go outside of our comfort zone. And when we get outside of our comfort zone, typically within 15 to 20 minutes, you start hearing these little voices that say, "You suck." Sorry, my voices swear. "You can't do this. I don't understand this. I'm not good," right? I just want you to know that that is common. That is part of learning. And we all hear those voices, no matter how long we've been painting or working in art. What you need to do when you start hearing those voices is you need to turn around, go back to something you know, go back to something you're comfortable with, something that you're good at, but make damn sure you get back out there into that uncomfortable space again, because that is where you will learn. So that's part of your head, your mindset, your process. the things that draw you to art, your environment rather, that's all in your head, the way in which you work. So then there's your heart. That's your inspiration. What is it that why do I paint? What do I love about painting? We may not even know, but it does bring you to a different place. What is your intent with your art? What are you trying to say? I think I'm trying to bring people joy. I'm trying to show them the beauty of the world that they are in, that we don't always take the time to see. I was like, look at this. This is so weird, but it's so beautiful. And it's kind of like a flower, right? Um, what's your artistic voice? That has to do with your heart. And the genre that you paint in comes from your heart. Those are the things that you're drawn to. And your hand is all about that new technique, that new brush, the tools that you're using. Even your artistic practice could be part of your hand. Any new training, any new medium that you're working in. But you need to think about all three. You can't just focus on technique all the time. And I don't think any of us do, but I don't know that we stop and think about it. And that artist practice needs to involve all three of those. We need to take the time to do exercises, to just, play. All of those have a part. I think that if you were to practice 15 minutes a day, I heard this quote and I don't know who it's from, it's not mine. But if you practiced for 15 minutes a day, 3 days a week for 1 year, you would be in the top 10% of people who are doing that. And I think in any other creative endeavor, or even in sports, what do pianists do? What do vocalists do? What do actors do? They practice, they practice, they practice, they practice, they perform. And yet, you put one of these in the hand of an artist, and it has to be a masterpiece, right? We get all caught up in this sense of, and it's stifling. So honestly, I want you to, if nothing else, take this away from our little session tonight. There are 3 stages to every painting. And I've gotten really good at giving up at stage 2. And it took me a long time to recognize it. But the first stage is, yeah, there's some planning. Yeah, there's some intent, right? But the first stage should always be play. Play. Get your colors out. Move the paint around. Play. And then you're going to hit your second stage. And in the second stage, there's still play, but we spend a little more time looking and a little less time painting. So that would kind of signify the second stage. You're also going to begin, if you didn't have a very strong plan, I don't tend to paint with a plan. And I was so relieved the day that I found out about Expressionism, because I found out it's justified that there are a lot of people who don't paint with a plan, that we come to the canvas. I'll typically choose a palette, like I know what colors I kind of want to work in. I know the mood I'm kind of expressing. Sometimes I'm angry and I make really gorgeous paintings, but most of the time I try to be very, passive, I guess. So in that second stage, this is the time when you can take that painting and turn it. Seriously, even if it's a landscape, turn it and look at it from a distance. One of the biggest problems with watercolor painting, especially, is that we're about this far away from our work, right? But that's not where people see. You need to get back. You need to step away. That's one of the benefits of working with acrylic or oil or on an easel, because you can step back and see that painting from a distance. So try not to get too myopic. So the second stage is when we begin to try to establish our plan a little bit more, and we begin to spend a little more time looking and a little less time painting. And that's where I tend to quit. When I moved out of that building into my basement here, I actually counted the canvases. There were over 400.
Oh my.
smaller than 16 by 20. That didn't even count the bigger ones. So yes, I've gotten very good at that. And now I need to garner the discipline to go back in and to take a fresh look. You know, sometimes if you're really stuck on a painting, just turn it to the wall. Don't look at it for a week, 2 weeks, and then look at it with fresh eyes. This is why teachers can be such great critics and critiques. They can give great critiques because they're looking at your painting with fresh eyes. They are not emotionally invested the way you are. But you better believe me when I tell you we struggle just as much as you when we're doing our own paintings. And then the third stage is when you start to really refine the choices that you've made. You can still make big changes in the third stage. You just have to be brave. And the thing to remember, especially in the third stage, is don't let anything be too precious. That's what happens. We find a little section of the painting and we go, oh, that's awesome. I can't touch that. Well, maybe you need to touch that to bring the rest of the painting in line with it. And definitely at the third stage, way more looking, way less painting. So I do hope that helps you.
Yeah, I
that-
love that. Great. Okay, well, we have 15 minutes or so left, so we should probably
So
get on to the demo.
I guess I'd better get on to the demo. I'm not used to these short things. Okay. So, okay, so the class is about loose paintings. I have to agree that they can record me. So Wi-Fi or cellular, that works for me. I'm unable to, that's perfect. Hi. All right. So I've signed in. Hold on a second. I did not turn on my camera. It's being recorded. Okay. Yeah, I don't want to do any of that.
Okay, and I'll spotlight your phone.
Okay, let's have some fun. Okay, I want to show you a few of the techniques that I use, and it's upside down. So this is how you paint in abstract. No, I'm only kidding. It's not upside down intentionally. Okay,
There we go.
there we go. I did this very loose little sketch on here, and I love to do stems in a clear vase. And you can see my roses are basically blobs. The thing about a rose, if you're painting it, it's kind of like a spiral with little triangles in it. So, and then if you're doing stems going into water, I just want to caution you, and this isn't the best example, but don't have all your stems going in at the same line, right? Some should be further back or higher up. Some should be closer. And then they jump due to refraction. They'll jump when they hit that water line. So this is another sketch on a quarter sheet of paper of some poppies. Basically the same thing. I don't sketch details, but I will look at details. So when I'm doing a painting, I try to find 5 or 6 references because I don't want to copy any one thing too directly. So I think my husband is listening to a book on CD or tape upstairs. I hope you can't hear that.
Nope, can't hear anything.
Okay. I'm thinking maybe he's going a little deaf. I don't know. So love this little spray bottle. It's called Aqua Mist, and I can just squeeze the trigger and it keeps spraying. It's kind of like that Mr. Clean. I love that for the same reason. Typically I would do a wet into wet underpainting, and I do want to demonstrate that for you. So I'm going to do that on this large piece of paper, and then I'll do the roses on the smaller one. What I love about an underpainting is it tones your paper, and your whites are going to be way more interesting if you tone your paper before you paint. Also, it gives you more cohesiveness in the finished painting because those colors, because watercolor is transparent, those colors will kind of glow through. And that's too purpley. I don't want that. I want permanent rose. I've just mixed up some yellow, cadmium yellow light, some permanent rose, and I'm going to mix up a little bit of cobalt blue. Now, with this palette, the better blue for hue would be cerulean, but cerulean is staining and it's a little more opaque, and I like to try to stay with more transparent colors. So we want to lay our colors down in such a way that the light can get through the color, hit the white of the paper, bounce back out. That's what gives your watercolors such beautiful luminosity. Typically, after I've done my sketch, I would take a white plastic eraser and I would lighten these lines on my paper so that I don't drag graphite through everything. But I've wasted so much time chatting that I'm just going to go ahead and slap my water on here. I'm wetting the entire sheet of paper. I'm going to pick it up, use the light in the room to make sure that I didn't miss any spots. And if I had, you would see them. They would definitely, oh, there's one right there. You see that? Oh, there's a spot right up there that I
Oh,
missed.
yeah.
Yeah.
And what kind of paper are you using?
This is a sheet of 140-pound Arches cold press.
Okay.
And it's kind of the middle of the road when it comes to watercolor paper. You can buy it in hot press, which is kind of like taking an iron and pressing it. It's very soft and smooth. And if you like details, you might like hot press paper. Cold press, the pigments tend to move out a little bit, and rough even more so. So cold press is kind of the middle of the road. I'm going to take my yellow. I'm going to ignore my sketch lines, and I'm just going to lay that yellow hither and dither on my paper. I'm then going to move to my red. A little red goes a long way, so we don't need quite as much of that. And then I'm finally going to come in with my blue. And I'm not going to cover all of the white of my paper. You want to move pretty quickly. Notice I didn't paint. I just laid the colors down. Now I'm going to pick my paper up and I'm going to let the water move the pigments so that they introduce themselves to one another. I want to get a nice bead of color right down here. Boy, I missed a lot of dry spots. Once I get a bead of color down at the bottom, I'm going to turn the paper again. And what's going to happen is my yellow is going to introduce itself to my red and create some orange. And the red will introduce itself to the blue and create some violets. Now, if we took red, yellow, and blue and mixed them together, we would ultimately get to black. That's why we don't want this paper to be sopping wet. See right there? That's a spot where my paper was dry. Watercolor pigments will go wherever your paper is wet. That is something I would call a happy little accident. I kind of like it. I'm just going to leave it there. I'm going to work it in, or I'm just going to cover it up later. If you find that you have pigments that aren't moving, I recommend you get a little Holbein spray bottle. We're going to be using this in the next painting too. You can just spritz. Water is like traveling money for watercolor pigments. Since it's so wet, I can just drag the color around with my finger. And look at the way those colors are just softening into one another. The yellow feels a little bit garish. So that's another area where I would just take my little spray gun, and it's like a quarter of a pump. Not much, just a little spritz. Get some of that yellow down here. And as long as your pigments are moving, you want to continue to babysit this paper and keep turning it this way and that way. Because what's going to happen if my pigments are flowing and they hit a dry portion of the paper, they're going to go, and they're going to stop. And when they stop, because the paper is dry, they're going to drop all the pigment they were carrying. And that creates something called a blossom.
That's such an easy and fun way to do a background.
It is such a wonderful way to do a background. And it feels like, well, now I don't have any white of the paper left. Well, watercolor pigments fade as they dry, and they will fade up to 40%. And the amount that they fade is directly proportional to how much water you used when you mix the pigments and when you place them on the paper. How wet was the paper? How much water was in your brush? So when I'm finished with this painting, these will be the whites of my paper, of my painting, but they will be so much more interesting. I just love that little mistake. You've got to embrace those. So another way to go about this is, where's my little sketch? Who took it? Right here. This time, I'm just going to take that little Holbein spray bottle and I'm going to spritz the paper. What I love about this, what this does, that the bottles that you can get at the pharmacy or Walmart, you know, they have spray bottles everywhere. They tend to put out a fine mist. This doesn't. This puts out little drops of water onto my paper. I use this all the time when I paint clouds. I'm not sure if the light in here will pick it up for you, but maybe when I'm painting, you'll see it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move to a smaller brush and I'm going to mix up some of the colors that I would use to create a rose. I've still got 7 minutes, guys. Whoop! So I'm using Quin Gold here and I'm using Permanent Rose. And I love to put those two colors together. Maybe a little bit of a cad red medium. That might even be a vermilion. Who knows what that is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start in the middle of my rose because the flower is growing out from that center. And those centers tend to be darker because of that. So I'm going to get this nice dark color here in the center. I'm pushing my brush down. I'm lifting, I'm dragging. I'm creating that spiral that is in the center of a rose. One of the most beautiful things about watercolor pigments is the way the colors charge into one another. I'm going to add some of this yellow, and I'm going to think about those petals. Is any of those dots grabbing that color? I think the dots are grabbing the color and they're diffusing the edges just a little bit. I can come back in after the fact and spritz a little bit too. See how that grabbed the color and pulled it out? Watercolor pigments will go wherever the paper is damp. Let's put a little whimsy in there. Let's let the colors just move beyond what we would normally expect. Now, because I'm painting on dry paper, I've got predominantly hard edges. And I think I remember mentioning earlier, we want a variety of edge. So I'm going to take a damp brush, pull out the extra water, and I'm going to soften some of those edges together. I can charge in. I can just drop some color in there, and the paper and the water on the paper will absorb that pigment and pull it and make it so much more interesting than what I could have come up with on my own. Now this guy's gonna fade when he dries, but I can come back and add more details later. A lot of what changes my shapes is the amount of pressure that I'm putting on my brush as I'm laying the color down. Push the brush down, pick the brush back up, clean it, get a second color, charge it in. We don't always see every flower from the front, right? You want to make sure you've got some that are moving away from us. I think that's some mistake that we tend to make. This is what a rose looks like, or this is, yeah. And then we just ad nauseum paint it and paint it and paint it. I want to take a minute to show you very briefly how I'll do water. So I tend to come right down underneath that ellipse with just a little bit of dark, and I'll put those darks along that outside edge. And honestly, I think this time I'm just going to paint the whole base of this, because this is something that you totally can do. I put the color down. I'm going to smush the color around. I tend to believe that when there's a surface of the water, it's going to be lighter because it's going to be reflecting the light above it, but it's also going to reflect some of the color of the flowers. So I'll just pop a little bit of that in there. And then you can lift I think a lot of people don't do watercolor because they're afraid of it. They feel like you can't ever get rid of it. But while this color is still damp, I can just lift to start to suggest my stems. So, and then later on I can glaze them with a little bit of blue or green, whatever colors I want. I often find that I move away from my sketch as I'm working. It's like, oh, right, just let it go. Let it be free. Let it be fun. A little bit of a shadow under here. Some of the flower color in the shadow. Hard edge, soft edge. Now that I've got kind of the bones of this thing laid in here, I'm going to let it dry. And then I can come back and I can add my darker greens through here, add the details of my stems. Another thing I love to do on a vessel is pull out a highlight. There's going to be light hitting this vase. So we can pull that out with our damp brush too. You just dampen the brush, take out the extra water, and lift. I would love to come in here and start to add some of my greens. I tend to have them hanging off the sides. And again, that's just pressure on the brush, lifting the brush up, charging in another color, using the tip to create the stems. Look, a 3-leaf clover. It looks like one of those desert, right? One of those cactuses that you see on the desert. Nepale, is that what they eat? So I'm just going to get rid of part of it. So this is the play stage. And I can't believe the hour's gone. I had fun.
How's the other one doing? Has it dried any?
Oh, yeah, it did. And I didn't get any terrible blossoms.
Oh yeah, it's quite light, isn't it?
It is quite light. And I had this whole stack of paintings over here I was going to show you, but that's okay. You saw plenty of them. And honestly, now that this is somewhat dry, I can come in here and start building the colors that I want to use in the blossoms. You don't have to let it dry completely. And this will, when it grows up, it's going to be a poppy with any luck. And then I can lift back in. Create some highlights, create some depth. Take your brush, flick. You can just have so much fun. And that's some of the ways that you can create a loose painting.
I just love the freedom.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
No stress to make it look exactly like the photograph.
Right. Absolutely.
That's great. Does anyone have any other questions?
Ah,
No.
no. Well, I so appreciate this opportunity to work with you guys. And I appreciate your being here to join me tonight. I really do appreciate the company. Now I've gone back to roses. Oh, that's all right.
Yeah.
It's gonna fade. You can just spend so much time dropping color in and letting those colors intermingle. So what if some of the green gets up into the flower? I think all the better if that happens. Keep it interesting. This is kind of a different type of leaf. While it's still wet, just go ahead and play. That's the key, especially at this stage of a painting. Want to highlight there? Just use your brush, lift the paint.
So,
Okay,
and
this
there's no time. I always figured that with watercolor, you have to work quite quickly because once it dries, then you've lost a lot of that freedom.
You have, but you're because of the fact that watercolors fade so much, you've got plenty of time to come back in and build those. But this beautiful green softening into that red, I
Yeah.
can obliterate that. I can save that. I can come back and darken along the outside edge, but that is to me what it makes watercolor just so intriguing and beautiful to play with.
Already that looks wonderful.
Thanks.
Okay, well, I've dropped the link to Sue's course that's coming up on May 25th in the chat if you'd like to check it out. And if you'd like to hang around afterwards, I'll give you a little bit of more information about Mastrius and the courses that are coming up. But I'd like to thank Sue for her time and her knowledge. That was absolutely amazing.
Thank you so much.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And so again, if anybody would like some more information, just hang around afterwards. And if you'd like to see this again, it'll be on the Mastrius YouTube channel. And be sure to check out the website for lots of other information if you don't stick around.
All righty. Can you bring me back so I can say goodbye?
Yes.
Awesome. Where am I? Pin. No. Well, perhaps I'm doing something on my wrong. I will on my end.
On gallery.
There we go. Hold on. Did you pin me? I could maybe pin me. And pin. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for being with me. I'm going to leave now. Don't be
Okay,
strangers. Bye.
great. Thanks so much, Sue. That was
Thanks.
amazing.
Thanks. See you later.